A storm is brewing in the heart of the Sahel. But this is not a storm of fear or despair. It is a storm of pride, of resistance, and of a long-denied reclamation of sovereignty. From the unforgiving deserts of Mali across the golden fields of Burkina Faso to the rugged borders of Niger, the Alliance of Sahel States AS is writing a new chapter. No longer are these pages authored in foreign capitals, they are being penned by the hands of the Sahel's own sons and daughters. For decades, the Sahel has been seen through the narrow lens of instability, terrorism, and dependency. But that image is changing day by day, mission by mission. The soldiers of US are no longer merely holding the line. They are seizing the upper hand. They are dismantling terrorist networks, intercepting massive supply chains meant to fuel chaos, and shutting down the plunder of their natural resources. And through each victory, they send a clear and uncompromising message to outside powers: the era of imposed control is over. The question now is this: will this unity and newfound strength be enough to shield the Sahel from the threats that still linger at its borders and within its politics? Could this be the dawn of a new era, one in which African nations define their own destiny without asking permission or bowing to anyone? If you believe that the real stories of this continent deserve to be heard, hit the like button so YouTube's algorithm will carry this message further. Share this video so your friends, your family, and the wider world know that the Sahel is rising not as a pawn in someone else's game, but as an equal player on the global stage. And don't forget to subscribe so we can follow each step of this journey together, a journey of defending sovereignty, preserving peace, and rewriting history on their own terms. The turning point came not from a battlefield victory alone, but from a shift in mindset, a realization that defending the Sahel requires more than just standing guard. It demands taking the fight to the sources of instability. This week's editorial on Defense Tone, delivered by Colonel Mariam Sana, was more than a news update. It was a rallying cry, a declaration that the Alliance of Sahel States, AES Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, is no longer merely reacting to crises. They are dictating the tempo of the conflict. Colonel Sana began with a warning that cut through the air like the crack of a rifle: vigilance is not optional, it is essential. Her words were aimed not just at the soldiers and citizens of the Sahel, but at the unseen actors who have for generations fueled chaos for their own gain. She made it clear the AES is not waiting for external validation, and it is certainly not asking for permission. The alliance has become a fortress, not only in the physical sense, but in unity, purpose, and vision. That vision has already taken tangible form in recent operations. The most striking example is a massive counter-terrorism success by Malian intelligence coordinated with partners from across the AES. It was not a small skirmish, nor a symbolic gesture. This was the severing of a critical lifeline to terrorist groups operating in the region. The operation began with weeks of careful surveillance. Intelligence units tracked an unusually large shipment moving discreetly across the region, not on military convoys or commercial cargo planes, but under the guise of civilian goods. When the AS forces finally moved in, the scale of what they uncovered stunned even seasoned officers. From the intercepted shipment came the inventory of a small army: 20 inflatable boats, complete with inflation systems, 4,000 camouflage uniforms, over 3,000 pairs of tactical gloves, 100 khaki uniforms, and more than 5,000 insignia patches linked to extremist factions. It was not merely a stockpile of weapons or gear, it was a fully equipped logistical artery, one that, if it had reached its destination, could have fueled months of coordinated attacks across Mali. The route itself revealed the complexity and the audacity of the operations planners. The goods originated from manufacturing hubs in Asia, passed through a sub-regional transit country, and were set to be distributed to terrorist cells deep inside Malian territory. This was not the work of a ragtag group. It was a network, professional and well-funded, likely supported by foreign actors who see instability in the Sahel as a strategic advantage. By intercepting this shipment, AES forces didn't just remove supplies from the battlefield, they dismantled an entire logistical framework. Judicial investigations were immediately launched to identify every link in the chain, from the factories overseas to the couriers on the ground. The goal was clear: expose the network, cut off its resources, and send a message that the Sahel is no longer a permissive environment for those who profit from its suffering. Colonel Sana's editorial framed this success not as an isolated win, but as proof of a larger truth: that regional cooperation works. In the past, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger often operated in isolation, each country fighting its own battles with limited communication or shared resources. Today, under the AS banner, intelligence is shared in real-time, strategies are aligned, and operations are coordinated with precision. This unity is perhaps the most powerful weapon in their arsenal. It transforms three vulnerable nations into a single resilient front. And for the first time in decades, it is their adversaries, both the extremist fighters and the external backers, who are left scrambling to adapt. If the counterterrorism interception was a warning shot, the next operation was a full-throated declaration: the Sahel will no longer be plundered in silence. The climax of this week's developments came with Operation Jolie Sana, a direct strike not at armed militants, but at the economic arteries that have quietly fueled instability for years. Launched by Mali's elite Tamaat Tactical Group of the National Guard, the mission targeted an entirely different kind of enemy: illegal gold dredging operations along the Jaliba River and its tributaries. For decades, these waterways have been bled by massive dredging machines, many operated by foreign-backed groups. The machines do not just extract gold. They tear apart riverbeds, destroy fish habitats, and poison the water with mercury and other chemicals. Local communities have long protested, but enforcement was sporadic, often undermined by corruption, political interference, or lack of resources. This time, things were different. Backed by the political will of the AS leadership and the operational precision of a highly trained unit, Operation Jolie Sana was carried out over a relentless 72-hour period. The results were staggering: 206 industrial dredging machines destroyed, along with 6 large-scale illegal processing mills. The raids swept through multiple regions: Bangumana, Damalai, Kangaba, Balan, and Donga, leaving behind smoldering wrecks where multi-million-dollar illegal enterprises once stood. The destruction of the machinery was not just an environmental win. It struck at the financial base of organized crime in the region. Many of these dredging operations were tied to the same networks involved in arms trafficking, human smuggling, and even the financing of extremist groups. By taking them out, AS forces severed a funding stream that had been nearly impossible to touch through diplomatic channels or traditional law enforcement. The symbolism of the operation resonated far beyond Mali's borders. On the ground, one officer summed it up with blunt clarity: "These dredges are often operated by foreigners, and they destroy the nests and flow of our rivers. We must stop this for the sake of our future generations. The law applies to everyone." That last line, "The law applies to everyone," was repeated in news broadcasts across the Sahel. It was both a promise to the local population and a warning to outsiders who had grown accustomed to exploiting the region's resources without consequence. Reactions poured in swiftly. Local communities along the Jaliba River erupted in celebration, with fishermen and farmers openly thanking the soldiers. Environmental groups in Bamako and Ouagadougou praised the move as a historic precedent for environmental justice in West Africa. Social media in the region lit up with images of destroyed dredges tagged with slogans like "Sahel sovereignty" and "Protect our rivers." But the operation also stirred anxiety in certain foreign capitals. Countries with economic ties to these illegal operations, whether through shadow companies or opaque trade networks, found themselves uncomfortably silent in official statements while quietly maneuvering to assess the AES's next moves. Western media coverage was split. Some outlets portrayed the operation as a heavy-handed military action that could harm investment confidence, while others acknowledged the environmental and security benefits. In Francophone African press, however, the tone was overwhelmingly supportive, framing Operation Jolie Sana as a long-overdue reclamation of both sovereignty and ecological heritage. Within AS leadership circles, the back-to-back victories: first, the massive counterterrorism interception, then the crushing blow against illegal mining became a rallying point. For soldiers in the field, it was proof that their sacrifices were not in vain. For ordinary citizens, it was a rare moment when government promises translated into visible, decisive action. Colonel Sana's follow-up remarks captured the mood. "We have shown the world that the Sahel is not just defending itself, it is cleaning house. We will guard our borders, protect our rivers, and reclaim our wealth. Those who underestimated us will now have to respect us." The climax of these operations lies not only in their tactical success, but in their psychological impact. They have shifted the balance of perception. The Sahel, long dismissed as a region forever dependent on aid and foreign military presence, is now asserting itself as a self-reliant force. Enemies are being confronted directly, whether they wear the mask of a militant, the suit of a businessman, or the badge of a foreign partner. The twin operations of the past week, dismantling a terrorist supply chain and obliterating illegal gold dredging, have created more than immediate tactical victories. They have triggered a chain reaction in the civil and political fabric of the Sahel. For the first time in years, many citizens feel the distant machinery of government working visibly and decisively in their favor. In villages along the Jaliba River, the removal of the dredges was not just seen as an environmental action. It was experienced as an act of justice. Communities that had been living with poisoned water and collapsing fish stocks now saw soldiers acting not as distant enforcers, but as guardians of their livelihoods. Fishermen who once feared venturing onto the river spoke openly of returning to their trade. Farmers saw the possibility of cleaner irrigation water, more stable ecosystems, and healthier crops. In urban centers like Bamako, Ouagadougou, and Niamey, the narrative shifted from weary cynicism to cautious optimism. Citizens began to talk in markets, mosques, and bus stations about a government that was not just talking about sovereignty, but practicing it. Political commentators noted that these operations provided a rare and potent alignment between public sentiment and state action. The government's priorities were suddenly tangible: defend the people, protect resources, and confront both internal and external threats without apology. The political ramifications are equally profound. For years, the legitimacy of Sahel governments has been eroded by perceptions of dependency on foreign aid, on foreign troops, and on foreign approval. The AES's decisive self-led actions have begun to reverse that trend. By demonstrating operational independence and the ability to coordinate across borders without outside oversight, the alliance has strengthened its claim to be the true custodian of regional stability. This shift is reshaping political discourse. Opposition parties, often quick to criticize, have found it harder to argue against operations that deliver visible benefits to the public. In Burkina Faso, parliamentary debates that once revolved around accusations of inaction now focus on how to sustain and expand these successes. In Mali, civil society groups are pressing for legislation that would codify stricter controls on foreign resource exploitation, citing Operation Jolie Sana as proof that enforcement is possible when there is political will. However, the new momentum also brings new risks. The disruption of lucrative illegal industries has created enemies not just among criminal networks, but within entrenched political and business interests that have profited from the status quo. Already whispers of smear campaigns and covert destabilization efforts are circulating. Analysts warn that the AES leadership will need to brace for intensified political pressure, both domestic and international, as they challenge powerful stakeholders. On the civil front, the operations have sparked a renewed sense of volunteerism and community defense. In several provinces, local watch groups have begun coordinating with security forces to report suspicious activities along borders, rivers, and trade routes. This growing cooperation between civilians and the military represents a cultural shift, one that blurs the line between state authority and community agency in the best possible way. Yet, as Colonel Sana herself acknowledged, these victories are not an endpoint. The deeper challenge lies in translating short-term security gains into long-term stability. That means building trust in institutions, ensuring that justice is applied fairly, and addressing root causes of insecurity, poverty, youth unemployment, and political disenfranchisement. Without progress in these areas, the vacuum left by defeated enemies could quickly be filled by new ones. For now, however, the Sahel is experiencing a rare moment where civil pride and political legitimacy intersect. The sight of dredges reduced to twisted metal and the image of intercepted terrorist gear stacked in evidence rooms have become powerful symbols. They represent not just the defeat of enemies, but the reclaiming of agency. And in a region where politics has long been shaped in foreign capitals, this week's actions have proven that decisive change can be made and led from within. Beyond the borders of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, the events of this past week have forced foreign capitals to reassess their assumptions about the Sahel. For years, the region was framed in policy papers, think tank briefings, and diplomatic cables as a perpetual security vacuum that required foreign oversight to remain functional. Now that narrative has been disrupted, and not quietly. In Washington, analysts within the State Department and the Pentagon have been taking careful notes. The AES's ability to intercept a sophisticated terrorist supply chain without U.S. or European operational guidance has raised questions about the future role of foreign military missions in the Sahel. For some, it's a warning that U.S. influence may be eroding in a region where it once operated with relative freedom. For others, it's an opportunity, the chance to redefine engagement from a paternalistic model to a partnership of equals. Publicly, see U.S. officials have offered restrained praise for the operations, applauding the fight against terrorism and illegal resource exploitation. Privately, however, there is a recognition that these victories were achieved entirely under African command and coordination. That reality challenges decades of conventional wisdom and the political leverage that came with it. In Paris, the mood is more unsettled. France, the former colonial power in much of the Sahel, has seen its military presence reduced and its political influence questioned in recent years. The AES's tone bluntly rejecting outside interference and its tangible successes have only amplified those questions. French media coverage reflects a mixture of grudging respect and muted skepticism, with some commentators warning that Paris risks being sidelined in a region it once considered its strategic backyard. Beyond the West, other powers are watching with interest. Russia and China, already deepening their relationships with various African states, may see in the AES a model for self-reliant security that could align with their own geopolitical outreach. Regional powers like Algeria and South Africa have also welcomed the operations as proof that African-led solutions to African problems are not just rhetoric. The ripple effect is not only diplomatic. Global markets have begun to factor in the implications of a Sahel that can police its own borders and resources more effectively. Investors tied to extractive industries, particularly those operating in the shadows, are reassessing their risk exposure. Meanwhile, legal trade partners are beginning to explore more transparent government-to-government agreements, recognizing that the old days of bypassing local authority are rapidly coming to an end. For the United States specifically, the challenge is strategic. If Washington wants to remain relevant in the Sahel, it will need to engage with the AES as a confident bloc rather than as a collection of dependent states. That means shifting from a posture of control to one of genuine collaboration, something easier said than done in the language of geopolitics. The world has now seen a Sahel that is capable of decisive, coordinated, and independent action. And once such an image takes hold, it is hard to reverse. Whether admired or feared, the message has been received. The Sahel is no longer simply a chessboard on which global powers move pieces. It has become a player in its own right, one that others must reckon with. The past week has proven something that cannot be easily dismissed. The Sahel is no longer waiting for permission to defend itself, protect its resources, or define its destiny. Through two decisive operations, one cutting off the veins of terrorism, the other striking at the heart of illegal resource exploitation, the Alliance of Sahel States has made a statement to its people, its enemies, and the world. That statement is simple. We will no longer be dictated to. We will no longer be plundered. We will no longer kneel. But victory carries its own dangers. History warns that when a nation, or in this case a region, asserts independence, it often triggers new forms of resistance from those who stand to lose power, wealth, or influence. The enemies of the Sahel will adapt. Covert destabilization efforts may increase. Information warfare will intensify, seeking to paint this unity as aggression or instability. The same networks that once supplied weapons and stole gold will look for new ways to infiltrate politics, manipulate the media, and divide communities. That is why the warning from Colonel Mariam Sana must be remembered. Vigilance is not optional. It is essential. These victories must not lead to complacency. They must be the foundation for stronger institutions, tighter regional cooperation, and deeper public involvement in safeguarding sovereignty. The fight ahead is not only against armed extremists or foreign profiteers, but also against the slow erosion of unity from within. Yet the horizon is filled with possibility. For the first time in decades, the people of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger can envision a future in which their rivers run clear, their borders are secure, and their resources serve their own children before anyone else. For the first time, the world is seeing a Sahel that acts with confidence, speaks with one voice, and demands respect not as a client but as a partner. This is more than a regional shift. It is a signal to every nation in Africa and to every marginalized community across the globe that sovereignty is not a gift to be begged for. It is a right to be exercised, defended, and lived. So as we close this chapter, the question passes to you. Do you believe the Sahel can hold this line? Do you believe in a future where African nations are the primary authors of their own stories? If you do, then don't just watch, act, like this video, so the truth can travel further than the lies. Share it so others can see what is happening beyond the headlines. Subscribe so you remain part of this ongoing chronicle of resistance, sovereignty, and unity. The Sahel has taken its first steps into a new era. Now together we must make sure those steps turn into an unstoppable march.